Welcome back all to our small town on the Ohio River. There is a lot to do today, and quite frankly not enough time. This build took roughly 9 hours, and we'll see the addition of a new neighborhood, this farmland, as well as a gigantic steel mill with custom train infrastructure. There was a lot of detailing going on with this one. I had a lot of fun working on it. The detailing could be painstaking at times, but in the end, I think it turned out great. I tried my best to keep this video as short as possible, so without further ado, let's get into it. Today we'll be starting with the quote-unquote boring part. This right here is the site of the cookie cutter neighborhood that I'm building. I thought it made a great spot. It would make sense. This is most likely farmland that had been bought up by a company and then just turned into this neighborhood, where you get like 3 or 4 options for a house model. So there's not a whole lot of variety, but they're usually built pretty fast and are an affordable, it used to be an affordable option for a family looking to get their start. I wanted to make it an interesting layout at least. I know I've built a lot of suburbs in this series already, so I thought, it'll still be somewhat of a grid, but I wanted to mix it up with, with this curvy road. I've got some cul-de-sacs on the outskirts of the neighborhood to really show, where it ends. It helps set up where the farmland will start to begin. And you'll see here, I delete some of the assets. It's that 2x5 house in particular. It's just a little bit too southwest for my taste in this neighborhood. I have it in a few other locations in the build, which I don't really mind, but for this cookie cutter vibe that I'm going for, it doesn't really fit the bill. I've also added a few lots where those houses used to be that are, under construction still in various degrees of progress. I thought that was kind of cool to show that the neighborhood's not entirely finished. Because I plop all the buildings that are in this build, I want to show construction actually does happen. These houses don't appear out of thin air, and I just think it's a nice touch to just differentiate the neighborhood from any other neighborhood that's going to be showing up in this area. I've also gone in and added some of these dark, I think they're supposed to be tractor like mud tracks, but I thought it was kind of cool to see, they're digging up the ground, flattening it out, and these big dump trucks are rolling through this neighborhood. These roads are not going to be clean. I didn't go all out just because, that would just take forever, but I did it in a few places. And then it kind of trails off just to, give you the idea that the neighbors that have already moved in here, they probably don't appreciate the noise that's coming from the construction. Alright, and there you have it. The cookie cutter neighborhood is built. I think it helps to stand out amongst the numerous suburbs already in the build. Also here you can see I switched it to permanently be the fall colors just for the meantime. I just like the colors of the trees. I think it looks nice, gives the build a little pop. Hey all, I'm recording this the next day, so I apologize if I sound different, but here I'm creating a bicycle and sidewalk from the old town to the new suburbs. The turn here is a little jank, but I think it looks okay. And then I'm going to add some of these safety cones along this turn to let the drivers know to, be cautious around this merge lane, as well as the potential for pedestrian crossings on this intersection. Alright, and here's where I'm going to build a road cutting straight through from that riverfront street to the back highway. I tried to somewhat transition from the suburb to the farmland, usually just with the tree line there. A lot of times you will see, you know, houses butting right up against farm fields. It's not uncommon to see it all. And then I wanted to make sure that not all these roads were the highway, so I mixed in some alleys and some gravel roads here. Using this livestock farm here to get some actual livestock production. You'll notice I'm spacing it one tile away from the road, so we have space for ditches and power lines. I'll also continue to use some of these farming services decals by the Broman 10. I like them a lot, and they help just make agriculture, you know, in these farm plots look way better than the default farming surface. They give it some more color. You can give it a few varieties from some kind of crop rows to like plowed soil and wheat fields. And then here I'm going to drag out some of these power lines, both for utility purposes to make sure that we can get power where it needs to go, as well as just for the aesthetics of having, you know, these power lines cutting through, you know, these streets here. I mean, it's pretty ubiquitous with like the rural roads. You know, as a kid, you'd always, you know, look out the window and imagine like an imaginary man jumping on the power lines. I don't know if anybody else did that, but that's definitely what I did. And then here I want to place a custom gas station at this little crossroads here. I want it to look run down, you know, it's seen better days. Maybe with the arrival of the interstate, it's kind of cut off the amount of customers this gas station would have seen during like the heyday. So I wanted to give it that rundown feel while also still having some functionality to it still, just to make sure that there are people coming and going around these areas. And then I really like the color scheme I went with this. I made it like a green, but then sort of like a dried out lime color. And I think the color scheme really works well for this gas station. And I add here a side part. Maybe it could be, I'm imagining like a restaurant or like a bait and tackle shop, just something other than the gas station that it would have had as like a side business for the owners. Here I'll add a little bit of parking, not too much, as I don't think a gas station this size would expect to have that many visitors all at once, but the parking's there for when they need it. And then I'm gonna add a mechanic shop, and I'll also take the default color scheme here, and then I'll just kind of whitewash it a little bit too to give it that same sun bleached look to it. I think it turns out nice as well. And then I'll just use some decals to dirty up the area. I'm using this house here from one of the newer updates. I absolutely love this house. I'm creating a sort of like a farmer's house here. I think it turns out pretty great. I mean, driving through like rural Illinois, Indiana, this is something you see a lot of times. They'll have a big shed for holding all of the farming tools and vehicles that they need. And then I think I might have gone a little heavy on the gravel here. So I might change that in the future, just tone it down just a little bit. But other than that, I think it turns out really, really well here. Something I'm trying to improve on in my building is adding maybe not functional pieces per se, but stuff like this, where I take the non-functional warehouse, I just plop it right next to the house here, so I can tell the story of here's a farmer who lives here. He's got his shed right next door where he can just wake up, early in the morning, get his tractor out and plow the fields, harvest the crops, whatever he needs to do to tend to his land, he's able to do that. It's while it doesn't really serve a purpose in game, I think story-wise, it paints a picture of what's going on here. Like, this is the guy who owns these fields around here, and I put some, not too much decoration out here, not too much landscaping, but just enough to let you know, hey, they also take, some pride in where they live. And then here I really tried to mimic the ditches you would see, irrigating the farms and acting as like a runoff point for any rain. It's hard in the game, you just can't get that fine of terraforming once you get down to that small of a surface area. And then I wanted to build a trailer park community here. I tried to make it look as nice as possible. They're not, I've looked around on Google Earth and you can find some really nice communities out there. So I figured I wanted to recreate something like that here. I put down this office. I figured it would probably act as the office for the park, for the probably like the land owning company or something like that. I placed down a lot of trees and a lot of bushes to give some sort of privacy for the community, as well as this custom grill out park. I kind of delete a lot of the secondary props for it just to make it a little bit more bare bones. I figured there was already a lot of landscaping around the area, so I didn't want to just crowd the space. Adding the junk to the side of the shed is also pretty true to life in a lot of cases. I'm not really sure how the infrastructure is for removing junk out, in rural areas like that. I would imagine it's probably like a service, so a lot of times people would probably just, set their things aside, and then it just piles up like that. It's not pretty, probably by any stretch of means, but it is something you see, so I wanted to reflect that here. And then I detail up this grain elevator. I would imagine the farmer here probably owns it, or it's owned by several farmers in the area together as sort of a co-op. Okay, I'm really excited for this build. It turned out a lot better than I thought it would. I placed down that building there. I didn't really know what I wanted it to be, but I knew I needed something there to finish off that kind of crossroad. So what you can see is I'm plopping down a bunch of these planter assets, and I'm trying to recreate like a plant nursery. I think the end product turns out pretty good. The main issue I had was a lack of flower props in general. Like, there's a lot of planters in here, but in terms of like assets for the flowers, there weren't too many. And then unfortunately it doesn't really, the colors don't really pop just because I have it in the fall colors right now. So I'll have to take a look and get some cinematics of it when I change it back to like spring or summer, because I think then it'll look really nice. Here, I put down some of these smaller infant trees that people would probably buy. I would imagine they're also in sort of planters that you can just pick up, or they're like in balls of root balls, things like that. Something easy to transport and easy to install on your own property or what have you. And then I got these, I think these were Japanese surface decals. I like them. They look old, rugged, like the dirt and moss and stuff in the cracks of the bricks. And then I wanted to find a color that would make the nursery stand out and pop in the surrounding areas. So I thought that pink was kind of interesting. It really really grab your attention when you're driving by it. Maybe make you stop and take a look. Here, I'm gonna try to turn this like newspaper kiosk into like a stand, I guess, for some of these plants. Like, imagine these are hanging plants, and then even like the newspapers in there, I imagine to be like seeds for a garden or whatever, like something like that. I really was trying to find like a floral archway too. I thought that would be a nice touch in here, but unfortunately I don't think the game has anything like that right now. Here are the cinematics for the farmland. I think it looks really nice. As we start building out around the area, though, I will also continue to, expand the farmland out, make sure the transitions work between different areas. But in the end, I think it looks really nice. It's different than the suburbs that we've built so far. So let's watch these cinematics, and then we'll get on with the steel mill. Alright, and here I'm buying 2 tiles west of town for the steel mill site. I bring out this 4-lane road here, and then I'm gonna bring out a highway road along the riverside that'll continue down that way as we build out the map. I want to clear out the trees here, and then here I'm just figuring out where this steel mill is gonna sit. Alright, and here what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the surrounding perimeter fence. I'm going to get rid of some of these shrubs. And I'm going to take some single railroad tracks with anarchy on. And I'm going to create almost a depot on the side to basically look like it's part of the steel mill. And the steel mill uses it on a regular basis to move iron and steel products to where they need to go. I had a lot of fun with this. It was pretty difficult at times to get the tracks to cooperate, to get the asset to cooperate. And essentially what I'm doing here is I'm imagining there's probably an inbound and outbound rail yards attached to the steel mill. This part right next to the side of the steel mill is the inbound yard, so all of the iron was coming in through here, where it will be picked up by the people working at the steel mill and be turned into steel products, which could then be transported either by truck or by rail. Anything by rail will be moved into the outbound yard, which it will likely be shunted by some train engines that the company itself owns, is what I would imagine. And I can go more into detail about that once we start building that out. Okay, here I'm wanting to take this rail through the asset, and I thought it turned out pretty cool. But I figured I needed to make a connection into the rail yard. Maybe, I don't really know if this would be realistic here, considering we already have a rail on the other side here. This is where the outbound yard is, by the way, or will be. I also struggled to get the rail lines exactly how I wanted, but I get there in the end. And I'm not a train expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I know, essentially the idea is to have an outside rail that is sort of the parent rail of the depot, so that when a train is coming in, it can stay on that single rail, usually on the outside or in the middle. And then it can branch off into each of these tracks, which would have the shunted materials ready for pickup, essentially, by any trains ready to move them to other locations. Here, yeah, you probably saw it earlier, but I kind of struggled with the concept of that. And then you can see the nodes are getting too close together, so I'm starting to have some funky curves in there that I have to try to fight using Move It. And for the most part it's pretty easy. I just wanted to make the outside rail as smooth as possible. I feel like that's more of the priority rail. Like, if anybody were to, for whatever reason, come through this way but not really need to, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm talking something out of my head. Oh, I'm lengthening the turn-off track there. But essentially, here you want this outside connection, the main thoroughfare, I guess, of this depot to be the priority track. So you want that to be as smooth as possible, whereas all these other tracks where trains are most likely coming to pull in to drop off or pick up some items, those can be a little bit curvier because the trains would theoretically be going at a slower speed than, say, somebody just passing through. Now, obviously, the train would just not come through the steel mill at all if they weren't looking to do anything here, but you get the idea. This is where the container cranes will be placed. The idea here is that the intermodal train cars will load up containers here, and then the shunting engines will then bring them around and place them in the outbound depot ready for pickup to be delivered to different areas. And here is the part I was talking about where I was struggling to get these trains to connect properly. You can see it wants to connect in all sorts of funky ways here. My idea here is that these container lanes, I guess, are completely separate from that track cutting through the middle of the steel mill, just for simplicity. And I think that curve would be way too sharp from the middle of the steel mill to get into this area, so I don't think it would be realistic to see that. So there would just be a pass through connecting the middle of the steel mill to that outbound lane. But you can see here it really was tricky to get all this to work. Had to move the asset in and out of the area to get it. And here's where I kind of found this inspiration from. I was looking around trying to see some ideas for a steel mill, and this is a steel mill just southeast of Pittsburgh. And I saw this, I wanted to see how grimy it was, how the railroad goes through the area. This steel mill is definitely larger than mine, but I saw this right here. It's a trench, which I thought was so cool. So the idea being these trains come in with the ore cars carrying iron ore, and then I'm not really sure, I don't know what I'm looking at there, but either the train car itself has a way to unload the iron ore into the trench, or the entire track itself is able to kind of shift. That's just speculation, but shift and dump the ore into that trench. And then that's where the ore elevator is. And then look here, you kind of have the idea of the inbound, outbound depots here with the ore cars and carrying the iron and the steel products. There's a lot more rails sort of zigzagging around this place than I have in mine, but given the size of this signature building, I just felt like it didn't need to be too crazy. So here I make several attempts to kind of mimic that trench there. It was hard to get the trench to actually be dug out. The main issue being when I'm trying to flatten the area, it's too close to the signature building. Matter of fact, it's inside the signature building in some parts. So the signature building itself was keeping me from getting to that desired, like you see there. As soon as I removed it, the ground instantly dropped down. So I removed the middle track there to create this trench here. And then I just take I have to flatten it out and everything, but then I just kind of go decrease height, select that height with the flatten terraforming tool, and then I just drag that through this to create a sort of a trench with the sidewalks. And then the idea being this is the inbound area, so all of the carts coming from some like iron mine or something like that would come through this area here. Either the cart or the tracks themselves are specialized in the ability to dump the ore into this trench. And yeah, you can see here the signature building messes up the terrain there, so I had to kind of adjust it a little bit to get it to a acceptable level, just to try to recreate that trench. Yep, and here I'm taking the massive ore piles from the Bridges and Ports DLC. I just take them, I put them in there to kind of fill out the space, and I just drop them down to, you know, make it look like this is full of iron that's waiting to be processed. You know, put down some decals here to give the tracks that concrete feel. You know, people and large, you know, industrial vehicles like dump trucks would be driving over this, so they would want to make the tracks, you know, as smooth as possible for these vehicles to cross over, not to damage the vehicles, not to damage the tracks, whatnot. So any of these big crossings, I try to put down some sort of concrete surface here, and it also, you know, it breaks up the monotonous kind of brownish gray track decal that they decided to use for it. Okay, and this I thought it turned out really nice. What I'm doing here is I took a lot of inspiration from Sunny Scunny's episode of his series where he had a mine, I believe, and he basically created this conveyor belt system to transport ores across a highway, something like that. And I saw that because I knew I needed like a conveyor belt system to get the massive ore pile in the trench up into the factory. I would assume, you know, based on that ore pile outside of that large building there, that's where the ore goes in. So we built this conveyor belt system here. The ore comes from the trench to in that building. It gets processed into, you know, something or another, and then it gets moved into that other building there for either finishing touches or, you know, warehouse storage facility. So essentially what I do is I take these conveyor belt blocks that you can find in Find It, and then I just adjust their rotation and their heights with the combination of I think Find It and Move It to kind of create a seamless covered conveyor belt line. Now, is this realistic for just this one conveyor belt to be able to feed from the entirety of the trench? Probably not, if I had to guess. For me, I mean, I don't know anything about steel mills or how this would work, but I'm assuming there would be probably some internal conveyor belts sort of inside the trench itself to help move the ore along and feed it into this conveyor belt. Alright, here I'm decorating the container part. The cranes were just a little bit too small for the size of the containers I wanted, but it didn't matter that much to me. You get the idea of what I'm going for here. The containers were very time consuming. It took multiple hours for me to get all of them placed on the ground and on these train cars, so a lot of this is sped up and cut out for your sake. The idea here is that the trains would come into the container area, and the cranes would then place the containers onto the train cars. The shunting engines that the company owns would then move those cars into the outbound depot area where they can be picked up by trains ready to deliver them to their destinations. Here you can see a train ready to take the cars to the depot, the outbound depot, and another train ready to receive containers to then be sent to the outbound depot. I'm detailing here, but to the left you can see it's basically a parking lot where a company would put the shunting engines and any extra cars they don't need at the moment. Here I am trying to figure out a net lane to use to cover these tracks. I just don't like the vanilla look. It just looks blah to me. I figured I'd use this darker net lane here, as it's closer to the riverbed here, like the river, so the soil would be more fertile, hence the darker look of the net lane. This is not going to be like the ultimate end all be all of how the train tracks look here, but I thought for this area right here it was a nice touch. And cover the outbound depot with some gravel there. I feel like maybe this could use a little bit more work. The tracks are just a little too far apart for my liking. Usually you can see these tracks are snug right up against each other, but in the end I think it looks pretty good the way it is. Alright, and here I'm detailing out one of two different areas around the steel mill that is basically open air storage for these. They're basically like I-beams for like rails or building. I just use these container lifts as we don't really have forklift things, so you gotta use your imagination a little bit. Alright, and here is where I'm trying to lay out the ore car props. These took a little bit of time. I used the line tool from Move It specifically because I could get the props, close enough together so that they would link. The only issue is sometimes it would spawn an extra one, so I just had to move that out of the way. And then I am changing the color on these train engines to be the CSX livery with the navy bluish color, and then that kind of golden yellow, I guess you could say. But those are pretty common around. I was looking at some depots to see what companies come through here. And then placing the ore down, I'd use several of the train prop assets with a full, medium, or low. This was a little tedious too because I had to then move it to make sure none of the ore piles were clipping through the cars. Time lapse it, yeah, there it all is. That empty line is for people, maybe they left those there after they just dropped off ore, I'm not really sure. And then I put some more on the other side to just even it out a little bit. And then something I didn't take into consideration is I have these assets here that are awesome. It shows, some different variety of things being pulled on either a truck trailer or a train car. I didn't really think about that when I made the cargo container area, so you just have to use imagination. They loaded these up somehow. But I'm gonna fill out the outbound depot here, detail it out, and I'll catch you afterwards. Alright, and there you have it. I cut out a lot of the detailing because at a certain point it just became repetitive of me, placing the containers on the train tracks and the trees around the area. Here I'm going to finish off the build by making that final connection back into the main line on the west side of the steel mill. I wanted to make it long enough for the train to be comfortable merging, and then I made sure it was on flat land so there was no hiccups with any inclines or anything like that. All that being said, that concludes today's episode. I mean, look at how massive this is. Compared to the last episode's construction, this is a pretty sizable build. Both the agriculture to our right and then the steel mill to our left, I think, add some great additions to the town, really start fleshing out, what kind of industries go around here. Next episode, we're going to be building the satellite town for the larger region here. I'm thinking the satellite town sits on this side of the river with the major metropolitan city on the other side. But we'll get there in future episodes. I want to thank you all for watching so far. Please leave a like and a comment on your thoughts of the build, what you like, what you don't like. And I just want to thank you for your time again. And with that said, I'll cut to some cinematics. Hope you have a good one.